Picture this. It's 70,000 years ago. There are no cities, no languages, no laws, no concept of marriage, no concept of romance, no concept of a future. You are an animal that walks upright, and your only job every single day is to stay alive. And yet, somehow, somewhere in that brutal prehistoric world, a human being looked at another human being and felt something in their chest that they had never felt before. Something warm, something terrifying, something that made no logical survival sense whatsoever. And they did not run from it. They stayed. That feeling, that completely irrational, biologically inconvenient pull toward one specific person out of everyone around them, that was the very first time a human fell in love. And here is what nobody ever asks. What actually happened next? Because falling in love in the prehistoric world was not a romantic comedy. It was not a fairy tale. It was one of the most dangerous things a human could do. And the story of how love actually started, how it evolved, what it looked like, what it cost, and why we still feel it today, is one of the strangest and most human stories that has ever existed. Let's start with the brain. Because love is not a feeling. Not really. Love is chemistry, and that chemistry is ancient. When you fall in love with someone, your brain releases a cocktail of chemicals. Dopamine, which is the same chemical that fires when you eat food or win a game, floods your system. Norepinephrine makes your heart race and your palms sweat. And oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, creates an almost physical pull toward that specific person. Now here's the key thing. These chemicals are not romantic inventions. They are millions of years old. The dopamine system existed long before humans did. Mammals were running on dopamine long before we evolved. The bonding mechanisms driven by oxytocin are found in prairie voles, in wolves, in elephants. This is not something humans invented. This is something humans inherited from creatures that came before us. What that means is that the biological machinery of love was already installed in our brains before we were even human. Our prehistoric ancestors did not choose to fall in love any more than you choose to feel hungry. The hardware was already there. What changed, what made it specifically human, was what we did with it. Because humans did something that no other animal had done before. We built stories around the feeling. We made rituals. We made promises. We made graves. And in those graves, archaeologists found something that changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric love. In 2018, researchers excavating a site in Italy called Valdaro made a discovery that stopped them cold. Two skeletons, buried together, facing each other, arms around each other, foreheads touching. The burial dated back approximately 6,000 years. They called them the lovers of Valdaro. Now, you might think 6,000 years is not that ancient, and you are right. But the significance of that burial is not the date. The significance is what it tells us about the people who buried them. Someone dug that grave. Someone placed those two bodies facing each other, touching, deliberately, carefully, with intention. That means someone cared. That means someone looked at those two dead people and thought, they belong together in life, so they belong together in death. That is not survival behavior. That is love. And it is not unique. Similar double burials, two individuals placed together with clear, deliberate positioning, have been found across Europe, across Asia, across the ancient world. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Anthropologist Helen Fisher, who has spent decades studying romantic love across cultures, has found that the neurological signature of early-stage romantic love is virtually identical in every culture she has ever studied. From hunter-gatherers in the Amazon to business people in Manhattan. The same regions of the brain light up. The same chemicals are released. The same obsessive focus on one specific person, which means love is not a cultural invention. It is not something humans learned from watching other humans and decided to copy. It is wired in. It is standard equipment, and it is very, very old. Old. But here's the question that matters. What did love actually look like when humans were living in small nomadic bands, hunting animals, sleeping on the ground, and waking up every morning not knowing if they would survive the day? Because romantic love in the modern world comes with flowers and dinners and text messages, prehistoric love came with something very different. Anthropologists believe that in early human bands of roughly 20 to 50 people, pair bonding, The technical term for two individuals forming a strong exclusive attachment served a very specific purpose. When a female became pregnant, she entered a period of extreme vulnerability. She could not hunt. She needed more food, not less. She needed protection. She needed help. A male who was genuinely bonded to her, who felt that chemical pull, that obsessive attachment, was more likely to stay, more likely to bring food, more likely to protect her and her child. In other words, love, real romantic bonding, increased the survival chances of offspring. That is why evolution kept it. Not because it was beautiful, because it worked. But here is what makes this fascinating. Evidence from studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, the closest living approximation of how our prehistoric ancestors lived, suggests something surprising. Love in those communities looked much more intense than we might expect. Songs were composed. Objects were gifted. The anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon, studying the Yanomamo people of the Amazon, documented men risking violence and social exile to be with the person they had bonded to. The feeling was not gentle. It was not polite. It was urgent and consuming, and sometimes reckless. Which sounds, if you are honest about it, exactly like how it feels today. Now here is the part of this story that most people do not expect. The evidence strongly suggests that prehistoric humans did not fall in love the way we do. They fell harder. The anthropologist Helen Fisher scanned the brains of people who had just fallen in love and found that the regions that lit up most intensely were the same regions associated with craving and addiction. Not contentment, not warmth, craving, obsession, withdrawal when the person was absent. The early stage of romantic love, what she calls limerence, is neurologically almost indistinguishable from cocaine addiction. And for prehistoric humans, without language sophisticated enough to process those feelings, without culture to give them a framework, without anyone to tell them what was happening or why, that experience must have been overwhelming. Imagine feeling the most powerful psychological state you have ever experienced and having absolutely no concept to explain it. No word for it. No story around it. No ritual to contain it. Just the raw, consuming, terrifying feeling itself. Researchers believe this intensity had a purpose. In a world where dangers were constant and resources were scarce, a mild preference for a partner would not be enough to override the practical instinct to leave, to find a stronger mate, to survive alone. The feeling had to be strong enough to overcome those instincts, strong enough to make staying feel like the only option. Love was not gentle in the prehistoric world because the prehistoric world was not gentle. It had to compete with fear and hunger and the permanent possibility of death. And apparently, it did. Because here we are. But there is a darker side to this story, because love in the prehistoric world came with a price. Pair bonding creates vulnerability. When you are attached to one specific person, losing them does not just mean losing a partner. It means losing the emotional anchor your entire nervous system has organized itself around. Modern research on grief after losing a romantic partner shows that the brain processes that loss in the same regions associated with physical pain. Heartbreak, literal heartbreak, activates the same neural pathways as a broken bone. For a prehistoric human with no framework for that experience, no language to express it, no ritual to process it, the death of a bonded partner was likely one of the most destabilizing experiences imaginable. And yet they kept doing it. Generation after generation, humans kept forming these deep, exclusive attachments, knowing on some level that losing them would be devastating. Which tells you something profound about how powerful that pull must have been. It was worth the risk. It was worth the pain. It has always been worth the pain. And the proof of that is in every grave ever found with two people buried side by side, foreheads touching, arms reaching for each other across thousands of years of silence. So when did ancient humans first fall in love? The honest answer is that we do not know exactly. The chemical hardware that makes love possible is millions of years old. The behavioral evidence, the burials, the rituals, the art, takes us back tens of thousands of years at minimum. But the feeling itself, that overwhelming, irrational, survival-defying pull toward one specific person out of everyone alive, that is almost certainly as old as we are, maybe older. What we know is this. In a world of constant danger, with no safety net, no medicine, no comfort, The first human beings who felt that pull chose to stay. They stayed through hunger, through danger, through loss, through every rational reason to leave. Not because they had been taught to, not because they had read about it, but because something in their brain, something installed by millions of years of evolution, told them that this one person was worth staying for. And you are alive today because some prehistoric human, standing in a world you cannot imagine, made that choice. That feeling you recognize, that pull, that warmth, that terrifying, irrational certainty about one specific person, you did not learn that. You inherited it from them, across 70,000 years of human survival. It was never just a feeling. It was always the reason we made it this far.